Hey, happy Wednesday. Come on in, pull up a chair. The Daily Dope is in the air. Howdy, gang. Yes, I'm Jeff McAleer, back once again as your host here at The Daily Dope, presented by thegaminggang.com, of which I happen to be the founder and editor-in-chief. So welcome aboard. It is a Wednesday night here in the Chicagoland area. And if it's Wednesday, that means I'm taking a look at a war game. And tonight, I am actually going to be sharing a bit about how to play and reviewing The Devils to Pay from Tiny Battle Publishing. This tackles the first day at Gettysburg. Obviously enough, it says so right on the box there. And this is designed by my good buddy, Hermann Luttmann. So that is what is on the show tonight. I've got some gaming news as well that we're going to tackle, and a couple other little items we're going to talk about also. So I see Flaming Herons popping in, and John Vogel's jumping in as well. Yes, happy Wargame Wednesday. And of course, Dan from No Enemies here is arriving in chat. Speaking of, tonight is Wednesday, August 21st. This is episode 348 of The Daily Dope. This is a live stream, and this is the first time you're catching the show. This is very, very casual. Only thing that's really scripted is the tabletop gaming news. Everything else just kind of comes off the top of my noggin, for good or bad. But because this is live, chat is available on YouTube, as you can tell, because I'm already chatting with Flaming Huron and John and Dan. So, one thing I also want to point out too is some folks ask, why do I repeat some of the things that are like typed out in chat? And the reason is, a lot of people watch this show on TVs or tablets or their phones, and you don't get to see chat. So that's why I tend to repeat some of the questions and some of the comments that the chatters will make. Do want to point out, chat is not on screen, not like some live streams, because it's one of the ways that I kind of keep some of the stranger commenters at bay. But I do pay attention to the chat, so if you want to say howdy, or maybe you've got a question, or maybe there's something about The Devils to Pay that you want to get a closer look at, or maybe you have a question about when I'm doing my how to play and review, by all means, please chime in. I will respond. Of course, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you check out some of the videos on the channel and you like them, by all means, please subscribe. Don't forget, ring that little bell, because it will not only inform you when a new video is uploaded, it will also tell you when the stream goes live, usually within about 5 minutes or so. Sometimes it's good. It's like, boom, right away. It's like, oh, hey, show's streaming. And other times, it takes a little while to tell people. But normally the show does stream at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time here from the Duct Tape Studios. Oh, yes. Although I have made some changes. And Hermann Luttmann, who we're going to be taking a look at his game design, had actually emailed me today and said, hey, you know, I noticed the difference in the video quality. So, fingers crossed. Fingers crossed. I did spend a little dough. I know. What can I tell you? But I wanted to try to improve the video quality. Next is going to be lighting. I'm going to work on the lighting a bit. And then after that, maybe the sound. Maybe the sound a little. Because I don't have anything to absorb sound like you normally will see, or hear, I should say, in some really good audio on videos and that. Anyway, so, like I said, be sure to subscribe if you like the channel. And don't forget, tell a friend. In fact, tell 2 friends. And go visit thegaminggang.com. It's my home website. It's got loads, it's got thousands of articles, hundreds of reviews. A lot of people think this is all I do. No, this is small part. The Daily Dope is actually a very small part of what you'll find over at thegaminggang.com. All right, Flaming Huron says, spend money to make money? I'm not making any dough, man. I'm not making any dough. It's all right. You know, I bounce around that whole Kickstarter thing too, and I'm like, should I, shouldn't I, should I, shouldn't I? I don't know. To me, it's kind of like, I wouldn't want to like have a Kickstarter and then be like, oh wow, it brought in $500. Be like, looking like an idiot, you know? So anyway, we'll see what happens one of these days. Hey, next month, September 1st, I will start my 10th year of covering tabletop gaming, so that's pretty wild. That is pretty cool. All right, so let's move on to some of the tabletop gaming news, because I've got a nice variety of news pieces today. And I know there are some folks out there who do not like the tabletop gaming news. I understand. If that's the case and you are watching after the stream renders, take a look down below. There are show notes and there will be timestamps so you can jump right past the tabletop gaming news. I like to point that out every night because if I don't, people are like, I can't believe you were talking for like a half hour before you got to the game. Yeah, that's how the show works, folks. So, you know, it's just how the show is. All right, so let's move on into the tabletop gaming news because Libellud Games, who I'm not overly familiar with, by way of Asmodee North America, is going to be bringing what appears to me as a kind of unusual family game to stores. It's coming in September, and I've got the dope on Obscurio. Doesn't that sound kind of like it should be one of Spider-Man's, like, villains? Like one of the Sinister Six? There's Mysterio and his girlfriend, Obscurio. I don't know, that just popped in my head. Anyway, here's the dope. The sorcerer is out to get you. Find your way among the illusions, but beware of the traitor in your ranks. Damn you, traitor! The grimoire guides their team toward the exit using images upon which they point at certain details. Working together, the other players have to find the exit as quickly as possible while avoiding picking the wrong cards. However, a member of the team is a traitor looking to lead the other players astray. A wide variety of traps are on your way to the exit of the library, making player communication harder. Obscurio is a family game, an original mix between an image-based communication game and a secret role game in which the players have to be careful when sharing ideas with their team. Supported by rich content, Obscurio proposes a fresh new experience in its genre by putting the emphasis on the details of the images and the constant doubt created by the presence of the traitor. Communicate efficiently and avoid the illusions on your way to escape the Sorcerer's Library. Obscurio is for 2 to 8 players, ages 10 and up, plays in around 45 minutes, and will carry an MSRP of $49.99 when it arrives next month. Well, interesting. Sounds kind of unusual. I wish there was like a little bit more. There were more images of the actual contents outside of just that one image I've got at the end. The only thing that I would be a little concerned about is what's the replayability like? Sometimes image-based games don't have tons and tons of replayability. But I don't know. That traitor mechanic really does throw a wrench into the works, though, I must admit. My next news piece. If you happen to be a fan or was a fan of the Jagged Alliance series of PC games, then you'll probably be excited about the new board game that just released from Modiphius Entertainment. And here's the dope. Jagged Alliance, the board game, is a cooperative board game, thus calling it the board game, with miniatures allowing you to take the role of your favorite Jagged Alliance mercenaries to battle Deirdrana and her minions in a game with uniquely variable combat tactics. With its modular map tile system and scenario creation and flexible progression, Jagged Alliance allows for brief skirmish games or evening spanning campaigns and allows you to build your own scenarios as well. Players can add extra movement and improve their odds of hitting in combat by spending fatigue or damaging weapons for greater effects. Mercs can then rest and repair or heal themselves, but each turn resting will move the time counter forward to the next counterattack from the enemy or a new event that will change the conditions of battle and or add extra side missions to solve. Players have to manage the different threats and missions while advancing their main goal on the map, which changes with each scenario. Mercs take their gear, allies, and experience with them through the campaign, continually improving their mercenaries. Players can gear up and improve mercs, free sectors from occupying forces to receive cash and better gear, save grateful civilians to man your militia, or stumble into roaming blood cats as you try to fight Dirdrana's nefarious commanders and their plots, which will escalate the more sectors you liberate. The game uses elements from combat games such as Dark Souls, Imperial Assault, or Conan. Wouldn't it be and Conan? And adds more tactical player decisions and influence, such as terrain and cover, and different evolving enemies, as well as new merc skills and tons of gears and weapons, and a meta gameplay managing your militia and defending your hard-won sectors. Jagged Alliance, the board game, is for 1 to 4 players, ages 14 and up, plays in about 45 minutes to a bunch of hours, and it does carry an MSRP of $91.99. Do want to also mention Modiphius has an expansion that just came out as well, and it adds some new missions and gear, but it doesn't add more mercenaries. I'm kind of surprised. And from what I can tell, I think there's only 4 or 5 mercenaries that come with the base game, whereas Jagged Alliance had all these different mercenaries for you to try out and to build your team with. So this could be interesting. This could be... You never know. I have no idea. It was a very successful Kickstarter, but Modiphius, I do not believe, was involved with this when it was a Kickstarter. And I think Modiphius stepped in to get this published. So, I don't know. I'm not sure. This is not the sort of game that Modiphius usually sends from across the pond for me to review. So, I probably won't see this. All right. Anyway, let me grab a quick sip here as Bones has arrived in chat. Thanks for popping in and hanging out tonight, Bones. My next news piece. Early next year, we're going to see an expansion to AEG's Tiny Towns. And I've got the dope on Tiny Towns Fortune. Tiny Towns, designed by Peter McPherson, puts you in the role of building a, you guessed it, tiny town in the forest. The smaller creatures of the forest have created a civilization free of predators. Yeah, right. And they look to you as mayor to guide their growing and thriving town. However, the area is small and resources are scarce. The clever use of limited resources will determine the most successful tiny town. In the expansion, Tiny Town's Fortune. I almost said Frontiers. Why did I? Tiny Town's Frontiers? That makes no sense. Tiny Town's Fortune. The creatures of the forest have found a way to trick each other into thinking shiny bits of metal have arbitrary value. That sounds awfully familiar. It's very useful, so much so that you can use this thing called money to get other creatures to give you almost anything in return for the right number of shiny bits. If only earning money weren't so difficult. It does look like we're seeing some new buildings and monuments to go along with the expansion's rule additions. Tiny Town's Fortune will be for 1 to 6 players, ages 14 and up. The game itself plays in about 45 to 60 minutes. The expansion is going to carry an MSRP of $29.99 when it arrives February 21st, 2020. I have to admit, I really enjoyed Tiny Towns. I did a review of it. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's very easy to learn. It's difficult to get good at. It's one of those kind of games where it's like you need to play it and you need to do a little thinking. Do a little thinking up here to pull off the win. So I'd be kind of interested to see what this new expansion has in store for us. Although it's going to be a while out. It is February next year. Junk Spirit Games has a fun-looking family fantasy game. It's arriving this fall. And here's the dope on Battle of the Bards. Get Bill and Ted involved in that, right? Wild Stallions. Battle of the Bards is a competitive 2 to 4 player dice rolling game with aspects of a deck builder. Throughout the game, players manage a troupe of bards trying to capture the audiences as they travel through the taverns of Tessendor for the annual performance competition. Each round, players will have 3 of their bards take the stage. A 4th bard will take a supporting role while it remains in your hand. These bards will provide the player with additional dice, and they will have a large variety of special abilities that can be used in many strategic ways. Players will also create performances, reroll dice, capture audiences, so like kidnapping them, and hire and fire bards in their troupe. Each captured audience provides victory points and a passive bonus. The game ends with a special encore round where each player's most heart-melting, face-melting bards will return to the stage once more to gain additional points. Battle of the Bards is for 2 to 4 players, ages 10 and up, plays in about 20 minutes, and it's going to carry an MSRP of $39.99 when it arrives in November. Yeah, so Flaming Neuron's like, excellent, dude! Wild Stallions! I have to say this, I like the artwork. The artwork looks pretty funny. Obviously, it's sort of like a fantasy theme, but they're not human characters. They're all like animal characters because there's like, it looks like a frog and a badger. So, it's gonna be kind of cool. All right, my final news piece, because it's Wednesday, it's Wargame Wednesday. How about a Wargame news piece? Because Tiny Battle Publishing is shipping their latest Wargame. And here's the dope on Okinawa. Okinawa is a 2-player game recreating the land, sea, and air struggle for the possession of the Japanese island of Okinawa from April to June 1945. Seen as the last stepping stone for the final jump toward Japan, the battle was important for both sides. The US had to prove it could overcome enemy resistance, securing airfields, and after the bloodbath of Iwo Jima, keeping their casualties low. The Japanese had the chance to test their new air tactics, relying on simultaneous strikes from multiple groups of kamikazes and conventional strike aircraft escorted by fighters. They also had a full army on the island backed with one of the highest concentrations of Japanese artillery ever seen during the Pacific War. They had to hold part of the island or inflict a level of casualties on US forces to cast enough doubts on their ability to later sustain a larger operation on Kyushu or Honshu. Stakes were high on both sides. The game covers the land battle for possession of Okinawa, focusing on the more military relevant southern part and the concomitant air and naval struggle around it. On land, you have Marine and Army regiments, tanks and amphibious tanks, Japanese forces that run the gamut between highly experienced machine gun battalions to raw conscripts. At sea, carriers, battleships, Navy and Marine air groups, Japanese kamikazes, and even the Yamato's last sorties are included. Even the Commonwealth makes an appearance with Task Force 57, the British Pacific Fleet. Okinawa is for 2 players, ages 12 and up. It's available right now. That's right, it is shipping from Tiny Battle Publishing, and it carries an MSRP of $28. Good deal. There you have it. So that was pretty quick turnaround by Tiny Battle Publishing as far as Okinawa. Because I remember it was only a couple of weeks ago that I did a news piece about Okinawa. So yeah, pretty fast turnaround. Do want to mention that even though I did not have any role-playing game news today, I could have shared some, but I figured, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are going to want to be checking out The Devils to Pay. They're probably like, I don't want 40 minutes of news, Jeff. So there was a lot of news I could have used today. Anyway, but even though I did not share any news about role-playing games, I do want to point out there's still 2 days left, today and tomorrow. So really not 2 days, day plus, for the Lovecraft sale, the Cthulhu Mythos sale over at Drive-Thru RPG. There are thousands of Cthulhu Mythos related products that are on sale. So Delta Green, for an example, which I will be reviewing, the 2 core books next week, which I'll talk about in just a moment. There's a bunch of Delta Green stuff that's on sale. I did not look to see if there's any Stygian Fox releases on sale, but I assume there probably are, because they do fantastic Call of Cthulhu supplements. Really, really good stuff. I want to say I sent the latest one that Stygian Fox did to Sammy to get her to do a review, because she does my PDF reviews for role-playing games. So Dan from No Enemies here is saying, thinking is hard. Put the bottle down, Dan. That's all I can tell you, because it kills all those brain cells. Like I should talk. So, I'm just kidding, Dan. It's a joke. Dan's always messing with people. Anywho, so, if you do go take advantage of the sale over at Drive-Thru RPG, please stop by thegaminggang.com first, because we're an affiliate. So if you click on one of our banners, if you do happen to make a purchase, I get a small portion of that sale, and it all adds up and really helps out. So just wanted to mention that as well. So what's on the Daily Dope through the rest of the week and into next? I'll zip through these pretty quickly. So tomorrow, Thursdays, I always do RPGs on Thursdays. So Flaming Heron says the Cthulhu Mythos 5e one I mentioned the other day is pretty good. You must be talking about Sandy Peterson's Cthulhu Mythos, which I think that's a third system that they've done for Sandy Peterson's Cthulhu Mythos. So yeah, of course, Sandy Peterson. It's gonna be excellent. Just like Ken Hite. It's gonna be Lovecraftian, and you got Ken Hite involved. It's probably gonna be pretty damn good. Anyway, on tomorrow's show, I will be paging through and taking a first look at the Lonely Mountain Region Guide for Adventures in Middle-earth from my pals over at Cubicle 7 Entertainment. So, I'm really looking forward to the new edition of the One Ring. According to the folks over at Cubicle 7, they will be sending that to me. So, Flaming Huron says, yes, sorry. I'm assuming it's yes. It's Sandy Peterson? I don't know. Sorry about what? Did you fart? Did you? I don't know. I know, I'm kind of in a silly mood tonight. I'm in a good mood. I don't know. Don't know what to tell you. Alright, so on Friday's show, I'll be reviewing Roll for Adventure from Cosmos Games. This was one of their 3 big Gen Con releases that I did receive. So this is going to be the first one that I'm going to actually have a review out for, so that's on Friday's show. Monday's show, I'll be reviewing Run Fight or Die Reloaded from Gray Fox Games. I find it interesting that this is the streamlined edition of the game, but it's in a bigger box than the original one. So, we played it once the other night, but we're going to play it again this weekend. So, I will give a hint. I do definitely dig the streamlined aspect of it, as opposed to the other. Yeah. So I played the first one and we liked it, but it just seemed to drag a little bit. Then on Tuesday's show, I will be reviewing Imhotep the Duel, the 2-player edition of Imhotep. So this will be the second of the 3 Gen Con releases I'll be reviewing. Then, Wargame Wednesday next week, I will be reviewing Richard III from Columbia Games. Yep, this is a classic. This has been out for quite a while, but so Flaming Urine says, yes, it's the Sandy Peterson one. I'm cruel. I'm being cruel. I assume that's the one you were talking about. Because there is a lot of Lovecraftian stuff out there that's been ported over to all different systems. Yeah, the only one I could think of that I did recently was a news piece for Sandy Peterson's. So anyway, so that'll be on Wednesday's show. And of course, this is one of the classic Fog of War block war games that Columbia Games is famous for. Then on Thursday's show, week from tomorrow, which there might not actually be any news on this episode because I am going to be reviewing both the Agent's Handbook and the Handler's Guide for Delta Green, the role-playing game. And this is the set that comes in the really sweet slipcase. So that'll be a week from tomorrow. And then a week from Friday, I will be reviewing Kamigami Battles, Battle of the Nine Realms from Japanime Games. Yes, it's a little risque. Some of the artwork is a wee bit risque. Oh, Bone says he meant the fart. Fart comment. It was just a joke. All right, so that's what's coming up on these shows this week as well as into next week. All right, I know people know it's about that time when I say, hey, thegaminggang.com as well as the Daily Dope, pretty much not-for-profit endeavors here. So if you like the website, if you like the show, if you like the channel, please consider making a small donation to Lil Bub's Big Fund and the American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals. Yes, Lil Bub's Big Fund supplies grant monies to organizations throughout the United States who care for special needs animals while they're awaiting adoption. So these animals might require daily medications. They could be blind. They may be deaf. They could have mobility issues. They could have feline HIV. Or they could just be long in the tooth like yours truly. Regardless, these animals still deserve to find forever homes and to find loving families. So, that's what Lil Bub's Big Fund does. So I also want to point out that 100% of all monies that are donated to Lil Bub's Big Fund are awarded as grant monies. That's very, very important to point out. So if you do happen to make a small donation, shoot me an email. My email address is right down there in the corner. It's jeffmcaleer@thegaminggang.com. And if you would like, I'll be more than happy to give you a shout out on the following show. Also should mention, if you ever want to just reach out or maybe there's a game that you want me to try to do a review of or get on board with a publisher or something like that, shoot me an email. It's okay. So, cool deal. All right, so let's jump on into The Devils to Pay. The First Day at Gettysburg, which is from Tiny Battle Publishing. It's designed by Hermann Luttmann, who is a good pal of mine, with artwork and graphic design by Jose Ramon Fara and Rick Barber. The game is for 2 players. I'm going to say that it's for about ages 13 and up, just because of the complexity of the design. I mean, it's not super complex. It does play in a couple hours or more. It's going to depend on the scenario and if you use some specific variants as well. This is available right now. It does carry an MSRP of $45. I do also want to point out that this is the first boxed game from Tiny Battle Publishing. So let's move on over to the other camera. So I've got everything, well, I don't have everything set up. I've got some stuff set up. We are going to kind of tour around a little bit. We're going to zoom in. I am going to kind of give you an overview of how the game plays. I am not going to go into every single tiny detail about this. I am not going to play some turns of the game or anything like that. But I am going to give you an overview of how the game plays and tell you what I think of The Devils to Pay, the first day at Gettysburg. I have to point out that I have always been a huge I don't want to say fan. That doesn't sound right. I have been someone who has been just fascinated by the American Civil War since I was a little kid. So, and I have toured many of these Civil War battlefields, including Gettysburg. So I probably watch Ken Burns' Civil War documentary twice a year. So anyway, so I am pretty darn familiar with many aspects of the American Civil War. So if you're not familiar with the first day at Gettysburg, of course, most people, I'm sure, are familiar with the Battle of Gettysburg. This was July 1st, 1863. Interestingly enough, the Confederates, some Confederate units, had heard a rumor that in the town of Gettysburg there was a warehouse with shoes. So they thought, well, they were going to go liberate these shoes. And of course, they stumbled across some screening units of cavalry, Union cavalry, and what started off as a small skirmish just kept more units were being fed into it until suddenly it was the Army of the Potomac and Lee's Army of Virginia going toe to toe in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. So I do want to mention the map itself is just a small portion of the battlefield, but this is where the events of the first day took place. So it wouldn't make any sense to have, a bunch of terrain on the map that historically nothing was taking place. So anyway, so the map looks really cool, and I will zoom in so you can get a better look at this as well. Rick Barber did this map, and it has a look of like an 1860s family map that you would have. I love the fact that there's a lot of different locations on the Gettysburg battlefield that are marked off. I think is just fantastic. You don't see that normally. For the most part, many of them do not have any impact on the gameplay itself, but just the fact that they're included really adds to the immersion factor, in my opinion, of the game. So Dan wants to know if I've ever heard of Bubba Hotep. Yes, I have. I've seen that movie. Yeah, exactly. There you go. With Bruce, I was just about to say with Bruce Campbell, and Dan says with Bruce Campbell and Ozzie Davis, right? Ozzie Davis plays Kennedy. Yep, I've seen it. That's a bizarre movie. It's funny. I mean, I thought it was a cool movie, but no Army of Darkness in my opinion. But what can I say? I'm a big Army of Darkness fan. So anyway, the map itself is just going to show locations. It's hexes, of course, and the only other game-related item that's on this is just the track, the time track, the turn track, right down here. That's it. There are not any like combat charts or anything like that on the map itself, which is fine. It's fine by me. I like the way that this map is laid out. So we'll take, like I said, a much closer look at that. So we've got the small box. I do want to point out, this is the first box game from Tiny Battle Publishing. This is actually, I think, I am not positive because I have not actually played any of Hermann's Blind Sword series, which is pretty amazing because I've played almost and reviewed just about every other design he's done. I think it's just the companies that like Revolution Games just can't get on the same page with them. Even though I reviewed, what the hell was it? Washington's Crossing? Way back in the day. So anyway, I do want to point out that this is a small footprint box. So I'm sure there are folks out there who are like, oh yeah, cool. It's another Blind Sword title. And then all of a sudden they're going to like, zoinks, what shows up? And they're like, wow, that's a really small box. There's a lot packed into this box though. So I will point that out. I'm sure folks will be like, $45 for that little box? I'm telling you, there's a lot of gameplay packed in this. So I will get this move this out of the way. So we got the rules, and the rules are very concise. I read through these. I had absolutely no problem understanding what was going on. They're laid out very, very nicely. There was one thing that I did have to kind of double check once I had read the rules and we started playing, and that was the movement when you give somebody an attack order, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But I don't know, maybe it just wasn't clear the first time I read it. But everything's pretty much laid out. There's examples for everything. There's loads of illustrations. You'll see I'm flipping past some tables. These tables are also included on the player aid cards. So, and then we finish up with the scenario. So officially, I guess we'll say there's 2 scenarios in this. There's a tutorial and then the main scenario. But there are some optional reinforcement rules in here as well, which to me becomes a completely new scenario, because it includes some Union and Confederate units that were in the vicinity but did not arrive in time to take part in the first day's battle. So, like I said, that's almost like getting an additional scenario. So, did want to point that out. As Dan says, love Hermann's designs. I agree. I've been reviewing Hermann's stuff since the beginning. We go way back. So that's why it's kind of unusual that I haven't reviewed anything from the Blind Sword system in the past. Okay, so I'm going to zoom in a little bit so we can kind of look at some of the player aids that we've got. But I don't want to zoom in too far. But this is going to start giving you some examples of the detail of the map. So each of the players will receive their own player aid. So this is for the Union player. Just about everything you need to play is on this. Unlike some games where you'll get a player aid and you'll be sitting there and you'll think, well, how come they didn't include XYZ? I have to keep going back to the rule book to check that out. How come it isn't on the player aid? You will not have that issue with the Devils to Pay. We've got the sequence of play. We've got Fog of War, which is a counter that gets pulled. This is a chit pull system. Got our command table. We've got the different orders talking about rallying, break tests, panic tests, special events, the event chits, because Hermann loves to design chaos into his games. There are event chits that put a wrinkle into the game as well, but they're nothing like crazy. They're not like weird hypothetical things. They're things that actually would happen or that did happen during the battle. Then we also get down here talking about movement and stacking. So talking about movement rates through various different terrain. So the Union player will have their player aid. The Confederate player will have their player aid. And of course, their events are different on the back. Then we also have the combat results table, as well as other combat related tables too. So I do want to point out, combat is not resolved just with a single die roll. You're actually utilizing 2 die rolls that are made at the same time. So you see how we've got the 3 colored dice. We've got the black, white, red. So you're going to use the black and white normally to generate a number between 11 and 66. The red die is going to be used as far as the cohesion tests for the units under fire. Really interesting aspect to the combat. because in one respect, in my opinion, it kind of alleviates really rolling bad dice. You can roll crummy dice, it happens all the time, but you don't really get skunked. But then again, it's also very difficult to really, get an incredibly devastating combat result. You can, don't get me wrong, but it's a bit more difficult. But I really, really like that. I really like how you're actually rolling the 3 dice to, and you're going to look at one chart, and then you're going to look at the other chart. And I'll kind of explain this as we get into the game. I'm just showing off what comes with this so far. Then we also get an order of battle. So we get the Confederate order of battle, and then we also get the order of battle for the Union. It's going to tell us the different corps, as well as the different divisions and the brigades within those divisions. So that is the different player aids that we receive. Then, of course, we got a bunch of counters. We've got some informational counters. We've got different counters for the different brigades. So let's zoom in, and we're going to take a closer look at these counters themselves. There we go. Yeah, that should be nice and clear. So one thing I'll point out is with the Confederate units are not gray backing. It's more of a butternut, which I thought was pretty cool. Now, when we have the chits for the different commanders, those do have a gray backing, but the actual counters for the Confederates are not gray. I was like, hey, that's cool. I like that. Because the truth is, most Confederates were not wearing Confederate uniforms. They were wearing whatever they could find. So you can see here how cool and how detailed this map is. So we can see here that we've got the Pennsylvania College. We've got, I want to say that's Coons Brickyard. We've got, no, it's off to the side. I don't think, oh yeah, we do. There we go. Carrie Shedd's house, which I think, if I remember right, I think that's where Lee made his headquarters. Almost positive. So it's just very cool how these little locations have been added to the map. And like I said, they don't really add anything to the gameplay. It's just, as Dan says, gotta go. Yeah, the girlfriend's yelling. All right, have a good one, Dan. We'll see you next time. Catch the end of the show when you get a chance. So anyway, I'm just saying that I really like the fact that we've got these little extra touches to the map. So let's look at these different counters we've got. So to kind of give you an idea, and I will actually zoom in a little bit more so we can get a better look at this. Yeah, I got the camera way up here. So, there we go. Got plenty of detail now. Oh, hey, Xcelera X1's popped in. Good to see you. Sorry, I missed you. Missed you popping into chat. So, we're going to have, we've got infantry, we've got artillery, and we have cavalry. Now, you can see here, this is dismounted cavalry. So to kind of give you an idea of the counters themselves, so it's going to say up top, it's going to tell you, okay, so whose brigade does this unit belong to? So this is part of Meredith's brigade. It's also going to show you, okay, so whose division? So we've got that as an abbreviation. If we take a look, we're going to see these little stars that run down the side. That's going to tell you how many counters, how many units are part of that brigade. Because each brigade is not going to have the same number of units. They're not going to have the same number of counters. Because the kind of design of the game itself is that it's more along the line of these brigades are broken up into different counters as far as the usage. How are these brigades actually used in the battle? So I thought that was kind of interesting. How some of these are broken up a little bit differently. So anyway, as I mentioned, so we see that we've got the little stars that run down the side. So it's going to tell us that in Meredith's brigade, there are going to be 3 counters. Now, they may not all be identical. They may not be the same thing. So for an example, we see we've got a strength of 3. So that's our strength points, our attack points. It shows us what the cohesiveness of the unit is. The higher, the better. And then we've got what corps do they belong to. So we can see that they belong to the 1st Corps. So as I was saying, not all these are going to be the same. So for an example, this unit here, they've got a strength of 7. This unit here, they've got a strength of 8. So there are stacking limits in the game as well. Stacking limits outside of town or on a pike is 20 strength points. So it's not counters, it's strength points. In towns, which basically we're looking at Gettysburg, and on the pikes, it's 10 strength points is the max. So those are the infantry units. So here for artillery, kind of the same thing, although it's going to tell us that written here is going to tell us whose battery. So here we've got Wainwright. It's going to show us that this is the only counter that's part of this artillery division, or I should say artillery brigade. It's going to show that they've got 10 strength points. Mixed guns, because we have a difference between rifled guns, a mixture of different types of guns, and then just regular cannon. We see that we've got the cohesion there, and once again, it's showing us that they're part of the 1st Corps. There is a step reduction to this, so this is fresh. These troops would be fresh. It's possible that they can take casualties, and then they become battle worn. So they drop from 3 all the way down to a 1 when they become battle worn. There is not an automatic elimination when a battle worn unit takes a hit. You actually test to see if that unit's broken, if that unit ends up being broken. So there is step reduction, but not an automatic step reduction, right? So there isn't like, oh well, I got 2 hits on this unit here, so they're gone. No, that doesn't happen. All right, the other unit we're going to take a look at would be the cavalry. So we've got dismounted and mounted cavalry. So dismounted and mounted cavalry are considered, to start off with, they're considered to be battle worn. So they can only take the 1 hit. So that's something to keep in mind. Of course, because they only have the 1 hit, you would still be testing to see if they're broken when they take a point of damage, I guess we'll say. So that is how these counters work as far as the units. We also have, as I mentioned, this is a chit pull system, so we have the different leaders. So we have the different leaders, we have different grades of command. So we've got superior, we've got good, we've got average, we have poor. There's an average, pulling an average here. We even have poltroon, which, if you're not familiar with what that means, that word means, it means coward. Poltroon is a coward, a dotard. It's another word that they would utilize. So when you're pulling the chits, to see who activates, you're going to roll a die based on the actual commander's rating as far as command. Now, one thing to keep in mind, they're only rated as far as the first day at Gettysburg. So there are some commanders where it's sort of like, whoa, wait a second. I'm sure there's folks out there who are like, well, no, A.P. Hill, poor. No, A.P. Hill, he's a pretty damn good general. Yes, for the most part, but not at Gettysburg. So that's why he gets this poor rating. So what'll happen is you're going to utilize. We've got good old Lego Batman doing his time as my opaque container. So you'll actually throw in the unit's leaders. All right, come on, zoom in. There we go. I don't know. I'm not liking the I'm not liking the autofocus on this camera I'm using here. But we'll see what we can do. I'll see what I can mess with it. But anyway, and of course, Pinky has arrived downstairs because God forbid I do a show that Pinky doesn't arrive to make sure that her presence is known. Right, Pinky? Of course, now she doesn't. Now she doesn't caterwaul. Anyway, so you're going to actually place your commanders in an opaque container and you'll draw them out. So this is all it's a chit activation. So you're going to have your Confederate and Union both in the opaque container. So when you activate, you're going to have this little chart. Got this chart right here, the command table. So you're going to roll a die and you're going to take a look to see, okay, what is the command rating here? And depending on the die, you could get no orders, which means you're not going to activate any units for that shit. It could get slow. You can activate 1 brigade of infantry or fire 1 brigade of artillery. Timely, you get to activate all units of 1 division under 1 order. I'll explain what that means in just a sec. Or fire 1 brigade of artillery, and you get efficient, which is the best. You can activate all units of 1 division under 1 order, or activate each brigade of 1 division separately, or fire 1 brigade of artillery. Do you want to mention, during the sequence of play, each turn, you do have an artillery phase where you're basically able to utilize your artillery almost like free. You don't really have to activate them. So that is how the chit activation works. So it's really cool. I really like the fact that based upon the commander's rating, you might have one hell of a time getting the brigades under someone who's poor to get a move on. So I like that. I like that aspect, and I think I think it's a good reflection of command as well. Paul Nolan's popping in to catch out the show tonight. Good to see you, Paul. Welcome aboard. So really, really like that aspect of it. Now, while we're talking about activating units, when you activate your units, you have to give them an order. So there's 3 kinds of orders that you can give. You can give an order to attack, you can give an order to defend, and you can give the order to maneuver. And it'll show us what our movement allowance is, depending on if we're attacking, defending, or maneuvering. So what maneuvering basically is maneuvering is that you're bringing units up. You're bringing units up, and you don't expect them to actually engage in combat. You're not planning on having them engage the enemy during that movement. I'm going to zoom back out a little bit. There we go. All right. So that's what a maneuver order is you're ordering that brigade to move, to move into position. Attacking, you need to have an attack order for your units to open fire on the enemy, as well as actually engaging in close combat, assaulting another unit. So that's basically what you're looking at as far as using an attack order. A defend order is essentially, you'll use a defend order when you're trying to rally troops. You'll try to rally your troops using a defend order for the brigade. So keep in mind, this is the order for the entire brigade. It is not the order per individual unit. So another aspect of the game that I really do like is the fact that you really have to move into position before you can fire on the enemy. There is line of sight. There's also ranges. The ranges for the cannon is actually pretty far. A lot further than you might think. But because line of sight does play a big part in this, and the line of sight rules are a little tricky. I'll be the first to point out, I found them to be kind of tricky as far as firing artillery, because infantry, it's only 2 hexes. That's long range. But artillery can fire as many as 10 hexes away. So, like I said, there's a lot going on with the line of sight, which is fine, which is cool. I like that. Another thing to point out too, there is actual elevation. There's different elevation markers. So when you're using, say for an example, you have an attack order. Let's say these guys have these guys here have an attack order. Normally they'll have 5 movement points. For the most part, usually just moving into open ground is just 1 movement point. Now, if you're going to go up in elevation, like if I wanted to move into that hex, I would have to pay an additional movement point. And it shows right here. I should say that's a steep slope. So that'd be 2 plus 2 movement points. So that'd actually be 3 movement points to utilize. Being on the pike, being on these roads, actually it's half a movement point. So you can move rather quickly along the roads as well. So there's that. Let me grab another sip again. So now I'll kind of discuss, how does the game play out? So you've got the sequence of play right up here. So the first thing you're going to do outside of the first turn is you're going to advance the turn marker. I want to point out that the scale on the map, I believe, is 150 yards to the hex. So this scale is actually larger than, I should say, the other Blind Sword series titles, I think. Like I said before, I had not played them. But I do think that that the scale is larger. I do know for a fact, I read somewhere that, or maybe Hermann told me back at Origins, that that the units, actually, each of the counters represents a lot more men than in previous like Blind Sword series. You know what? Maybe I'm wrong. I think it's 250. I think it's 250 yards. I don't know. Anyway, time scale is also 1 hour per turn. So what'll happen is you'll actually go through the process of all your chits being pulled out of the cup or container or whatever to finish up the turn. So we've got that. Then we've got the command decision phase. So we've got these different special events. We've got these event chits. And I had mentioned the events previously because they're on the back of each of the player aid cards. So you've got 8 different events to choose from. I thought this is very interesting. So what you're going to do is every turn you're going to select 2 of the events. Let's say I want these 2, right? I want these 2 events to take place. I am then going to flip these over, and I am going to kind of mix these around. So I'm going to take these 2 events. These 2 events go into the opaque container. Then I'm going to choose 2 more events randomly. Those are going to go into the opaque container. Then we have a fog of war chit. This fog of war chit, we have a fog of war chart here that we roll dice when this fog of war chit comes up. So something unusual could happen. We could have Confederate general or Union general removed from action or a casualty. You could get the units moved to the wrong hex. You get to move them around. You get Fortunes of War, randomly replace 1 used or omitted chit into the cup. That's for both the rebels and the Union player. So lots of stuff going on here. Lots of randomness. Like I said, Hermann loves to design chaos into his games, but this game is not chaotic. When you play, the game plays out like the first day at Gettysburg with variation. There is variance to it, but you're never playing this and you're thinking, what? That makes absolutely no sense. Just like, for an example, if the Union player loses a general, it's Reynolds first, because he was killed during the first day at Gettysburg, so he would be taken out. Confederates, I want to say, if they lose a general, it is Henry Heath who is taken out of action. So anyway, so we got the fog of war. So we put the fog of war in. As the game continues, we get friction of war. So we get these friction of war counters that will be added into the mix as we play. We'll hit a certain turn marker. We'll put the first one in, and then we'll hit another turn marker, and then we get the other one goes in. And this will be every turn. So what the friction of war basically is, it's the breakdown of cohesion. It's a breakdown of communications. It's battle fatigue, all kind of rolled up into one. And when you pull out a friction of war counter, the next counter you pull out, the next shit you pull, gets ignored. And I'm telling you, it's not too cool. It turns out to be one of yours. You're like, damn it! Damn you, friction of war! All right, so that's when we're putting everything into the cup. That is during our command decision phase, when we're putting everything, all the counters in there. And of course, you're only putting in commander counters of units that are on the field. You're going to have all these different reinforcements and things like that you're going to have. You can stack them up on the actual time track. I found that it gets really messy, so we were sort of putting them off to the side, kind of stacking them up off to the side and just checking as we played. Okay, who's coming in at this time? Who's coming in at this time? So anyway, so that is that. Then we have the special artillery phase, which I was talking about before, where you'll get to activate each of your artillery brigades. So you can either move them or fire them. Now, one thing with the artillery, you would think that you would have limbered and unlimbered, but you don't. It is, and I understand that. I actually appreciated that. We have fresh and we have battle worn, as opposed to limbered and unlimbered. This isn't a miniatures game. We're not getting down into like a skirmish scale or really telescoping in. So it really doesn't matter if the artillery is limbered or unlimbered. Hey, Jorge Rodriguez has popped in. All right, good deal. We got a good chat going. Quite a few people are here. Good to see you, Jorge. So anyway, I do want to mention that. So once again, you can use the option of either moving your artillery or firing your artillery. And each artillery battery will get a chance to activate. That That said, you do have the opportunity during the actual draw phase when you're able to give orders out, you can order a battery again to attack. So that's something to keep in mind, that you can have units attacking more than once. So we've got that. Then we got the chit draw phase. That's where we're drawing who's going next, what's going on. So that's when you're going to give your orders to your units. A few things that I want to point out is that, as I mentioned with the stacking, you got a stacking limitation of 20 outside of being on pike hexes or town hexes. The most you can attack with is 10 strength points. So you'll see we've got 10 or more. So if you had 12, you're rolling on the 10 or more. So what'll happen is if you have multiple units stacked in a hex, a lot of times you're going to try to make sure that you don't go too far over the 10 when you attack. Now you cannot split. So for an example here, right? We're looking at this. It says strength points of 8. You cannot split this strength to attack two different hexes. You can use the 8 in full. So let's say, for an example, let's say I've got these 3. Let's see. Yeah, let's do this. Let's say I've got these 3. No, they're not part of the same. Damn it. All right, so as an example, I know I'm making things complex now. Let's say I had another unit that's underneath Meredith, right? So let's say it's a 4. So altogether, I would have 15 points. Well, I'm not going to want to spend my 15 points and only roll on the 10 strength points. So I would hopefully have another target for my 4 strength to fire at. So as I mentioned before, you're going to roll, as that sticks to my hand, you're going to roll your dice. Say black's the 10s, white's the 1s. So I get a 55. Now, doubles actually is interesting too. So let's say I was attacking with 8 strength points. So I got a 10. I got 55. So I'm going to look here. And we're going to see here, 55 shows -2 to the cohesion test. So I look at the 8. I look at the 55, so I get a T result. So I'm going to take a look here. I'm going to look at my fire cohesion, right? I've got a 6. You add the combat rating, or the cohesion rating, I should say, of the defenders. So let's say, as an example, we've got... here we go. Let's say it's Pettigrew's brigade. So they've got a 3. So I've got 6, 9. But, remember, I have a -2. So it's actually 7. So I take a look at the 7 result under T, and it'll say shaken, skedaddle 1. And it'll tell you, okay, so if you've got shaken, so they're going to take a shaken counter, which is like so. So that gives them a -1 to their cohesion. It also gives them a -1 to their strength. So, and then they have the option of skedaddling 1 hex. So basically moving away from them 1 hex. What you need to see is you need to look where you get the DPs. DP is where you've got where they're going to lose that step, where they're going to go from fresh to combat worn. So that's what the DP means. You're gonna bring them down. If we see a result with a plus, that means both things have to happen. If we see the parentheses, that happens, and then you have the option of this. If we get a slash, it's kind of like either or. You're gonna choose which one of those happen. So then we got like assault combat. So of course, assault combat, you got to be next to each other. Oh, here, one thing I should point out with the combat results is we can get no effect, but then we can get a firefight. I thought this is really interesting. So what happens here, if you see anything that's got a firefight result, that means the defender opens fire. So it's possible you can go back and forth with more than just one attack roll with the attackers and the defenders. It's possible for you to actually get firefights on multiple rolls. So I thought that was kind of cool too, where it's like, they're really pouring it on. So I thought that made a nice, kind of nice extra aspect to the combat. So we're not looking at just, combat result tables all the time. Hey, all right, Hubcam 210 is in the house. Good to have you on board, Hubcam. So we also have assault combat. Of course, you got to be next to each other to have assault combat. So talks about here the different column shifts for assault combat. We have column shifts for fire combat, which take place on here. That's why we've got these additional columns here beyond the 10, because we can have column shifts. Then of course we've got the test as far as their cohesion. So we've got the rally test. So you can have shaken units, but then broken units are basically they're broken. They're running away, or they're just scattering off, or they've been gunned down. So you've got the rally, you've got your break tests, you've got panic tests. And then one other aspect that I thought was pretty wild is if you have a commander casualty, if you roll that same commander casualty again, they return to action. If you get a commander casualty, there are replacement chits. And of course, for the most part, these replacement chits, these commanders are not very good. So this is where we start seeing, poltroon ratings. But I thought that was pretty wild too, that each of the brigades, and the division commanders as well, all have a replacement. So I thought that was pretty cool. So like I said, if you have a command casualty, you'll look for that person. A lot of times you're looking for their name on the back. It's going to tell you who the replacements are for. And if you get that same casualty for that unit, then their commander comes back. So I thought that was pretty wild. I thought that was kind of cool. Almost, it's almost like a Winfield Scott Hancock kind of thing. So that is the only other phase left is going to be, of course, I was talking about activating your units to give them attack, defend, or maneuver orders. And then we got an end phase. And the end phase is just basically taking your leader counters, putting them back into the cup. Then, of course, making sure you've got your event chits as well to be able to pull those. Making sure you've got the fog of war in there, and so on and so forth. And then you maneuver on to the next hour. As far as victory, so for the most part, the Confederates have some automatic, the Union and Confederates have automatic win conditions. So if the Confederates at any time are able to take Any one of the 3 hexes on Cemetery Hill, which is down that way on the board, then they automatically win. If the Union takes specific hexes to basically block the route that most of the Confederates are taking in, that's going to award the Union an automatic victory as well. That probably is not going to happen most games. So what you do is, as you play through the turns, you're going to score victory points for various hexes that you control at the end of the game. You're going to also score victory points for each step reduction, for the brigades that units that you've eliminated, that you've broken, I should say. You get bonus points if you've broken an entire brigade. So if you've broken like all 3 or 4 counters, all 3 or 4 units from that brigade, you'll get bonus victory points. And I'm talking like 8 victory points. So it's a big boost. And of course, then you'll total your victory points up, and whoever's got the most victory points is the winner. All in all, that is pretty much The Devils to Pay from Tiny Battle Publishing. So, what do I think, and what is my review score? Well, and of course, Hermann Luttmann's a good buddy of mine. I make no bones about it. I point this out all the time. And if this was not a great design, I'd be very honest. And Hermann knows that. I'm sure most people who follow the gaming gang know that as well. That said, this is a really good design. This is a really cool game. There's a lot of, and I've played a lot of Civil War games over the years, all the way back. What was it? The 77 edition? What was it? 76? The Avalon Hill Gettysburg game. I've played Victory Games Civil War, which was always one of my favorites. And Jorge's saying, thanks for reviewing this. Sure, of course. So, like I said, it's a Hermann Luttmann design. I always try to do reviews for Hermann stuff. But anyway, I've played quite a lot of Civil War games over the years, and I played a lot of miniatures. Tons of miniatures. Fire and Fury was my system. And at one point, I had like 2,400 15 millimeter minis that I had painted. I eventually sold them, but like I said, I'm into the Civil War. Anyway, there's a lot going on in this game that I have not seen in previous Civil War games I've played. I have to also point out, I have not played any of the Blind Sword system games in the past, so I'm sure it's got a lot of similarities to those previous titles, but I've never played them. I like the chit activation. I always like chit activation. Hubcam is asking, when does this come out? It's out now. It's available right now from Tiny Battle Publishing. You can go to tinybattlepublishing.com. Anywho, not to get sidetracked. Anyway, I like the chit activation. I always like chit activation. I like the event chits that are included as well. Like I said, Hermann's really big on, putting variance in there, getting some chaos in there. But once again, these events aren't like crazy. You're not going to sit there and go, holy shit, what? No, that wouldn't happen. It's more, they're a little more minor things. One of them's pretty wild, where it's, you can force the rebels to, they're over rambunctious, right? So you can choose a Confederate unit to attack in close combat one of your Union counters. So it's sort of like, yeah, well, if I've got somebody shaken and maybe they're battle worn, yeah, okay, come on, bring it on. Let me try to eliminate you. So stuff like that. Not crazy. Oh well, somebody found the orders wrapped in paper with cigars, and now we know everything that Lee's gonna do. No, nothing like that. Even though that did happen. So I like that. Love the map. I think the map is excellent. I think game once you understand how it works, once you get a grasp of the system itself, it moves along fairly well. There was some analysis paralysis by Cameron playing this, but then again, he doesn't play a lot of war games of this depth. So, as far as playing it where it felt, I mean, it felt like the first day at Gettysburg. It really did. But it also felt like it wasn't predetermined that the events of July 1st, 1863 were locked, were set in stone. So there was some variance there. I played the Confederates and won. But then again, I chalked that up to my experience playing war games and Cameron's lack of experience for the most part. As opposed to just being like, haha, well, I took advantage of all these, these discrepancies and these broken mechanics and things like that. No, nothing like that at all. So I like the fact that it doesn't necessarily have to be balanced, but it feels pretty balanced as well. That it's not, like I said, not set in stone. Like sometimes you'll play a war game where, one side historically lost, and really the only option you have is don't lose as badly as they did. I'm not really into those kind of games. So anyway, so I love the map. I love the map artwork. The component quality is good. Counters are a little thin, but that's kind of a tiny battle thing. I would have liked them a little bit thicker. Do want to point out that the counters on at least the counter sheet that I had, some of them were cut a little off center. Got to ding it a little bit for that. But that might just been in this print run. Or it might have just been this batch, or the copy I got just happened to be that case. So I'm not going to ding it really hard, because it's not as if the counters are unusable or unreadable. Speaking of unreadable, though, there are some of the counters, just the color combinations that were used, make some of the counters a little tougher to make out than others, especially when we're talking about like the divisions. You're kind of like, what? So, not all of them, but some of them. A few of them, I should say. There are a few that were a little difficult to kind of make out. And I'm not sure if that was because of the color that was used, or just the print wasn't like real heavy. It wasn't heavy enough. So, anyway, but those are really, really minor quibbles that I have in what otherwise is an excellent design. It is an excellent Civil War game. I really felt the back and forth. That's one of the reasons why I loved shit activation for the most part in a lot of games, because you got to not only be planning, but you have to be able to think on your feet too, because you might go a few chits until it's your turn. You may see like your opponent go 3 or 4 times in a row, and you're like, So I love that aspect of it as well. All in all, on a scale of 1 to 10, I give The Devils to Pay a very, very solid 9 out of 10. It is that good. This might actually become your go-to game as far as Gettysburg. I would like to see it expanded out a bit more. Now, I do know that Hermann has done other Gettysburg titles. So, and I do believe Longstreet Attacks is one of them. I think he did for Revolution. So I'm not sure if we're going to see like the second day for this system for Tiny Battle Publishing. But I'll tell you right now, The Devils to Pay for Tiny Battle Publishing should become an evergreen. It really should. It is that good. And if you have any interest in the American Civil War, definitely pick up The Devils to Pay. All right, so that is it for tonight's show. Pretty long show. Almost an hour and a half. In fact, it might be an hour and a half by the time I wrap this up. As I mentioned, on tomorrow's show, we're going to dive in and take a first look and page through the Lonely Mountain Region Guide for Adventures in Middle-earth from Cubicle 7 Entertainment. All right, so there you have it. As I like to always point out, if you like the video, please give it a quick thumbs up. If you dig the channel, please subscribe. Got a couple of contest going on right now. I am not going to get into. Just simply, you can check out a previous episode, or you can just go to the Twitter feed. You'll see them. But I do have 2 contests going on. But anyway, as I like to point out, give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Please subscribe if you dig the channel. And of course, don't forget, visit thegaminggang.com for all the latest in gaming news, reviews, comics, movies, TV. By now you know the drill. Get your geek on at thegaminggang.com. I'll be back tomorrow. It's Thursday. A lot of RPG stuff, as well as the Lonely Mountain Region Guide. So, those of you out there who joined me in chat, thank you so much for hanging out and keeping me company. Those who watched live but didn't jump into chat, you should. We don't bite. We're pretty friendly. And of course, regardless if you're watching live or after the fact on Memorex, I definitely really appreciate you watching. So, until tomorrow, everybody, happy trails. Thanks again for watching The Daily Dope, presented by The Gaming Gang. If you like this episode, be sure to give it a quick thumbs up. And if you dig the channel, please subscribe. If you'd like to check out our previous episode, click right here. And if you want to check out a somewhat randomly selected episode, give a click right down here. It'll be like opening a box of Cracker Jacks. You just don't know what you'll get. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'm Jeff McAleer.